giving us 1,440. 1,440. We will be back. Welcome back. Let's continue from where we got to. We were on employee Youngson as our fourth employee for the second week of June. And Youngson produced 105 units, and the rate still remains 15 cedis as indicated here, 15 per unit produced. So we are multiplying the output by Youngson, which is the 105, by the rate per unit, which is 15 cedis. So we have 105 units multiplied by the rate of 15. 105 by 15, giving us 1,575 cedis. Then his minimum rate that have been set is still the 38 hours multiplied by the rate given to Youngson, which is 35 cedis indicated here per the guaranteed hourly minimum rate. So we multiply the 38 hours worked by each employee for the second week of June by the 35 cedis given to Youngson. So 38 hours multiplied by the 38 cedis. Sorry. The rate is 35, so we multiply by 35 cedis. So we have 38 multiplied by 35 cedis, giving us 1,330. 1,330 cedis. So, as I indicated earlier, when an employee produces beyond the guaranteed minimum rate that have been set by an organization, they are paid based on the quantity or unit they produce. But if their minimum rate is higher than the unit they produce, they are paid the minimum wage. So let's look at Raymond. His piecework earned him 1,800, but the minimum rate that was set for him was what? 1,292. As you can see here, the piecework was 1,800, and then the minimum wage was 1,292. So his basic pay is going to be what? The highest amount. If his guaranteed minimum rate was higher than the piecework, we will pay him the guaranteed minimum wage at the end of the second week. But since he produced beyond the minimum wage, we will pay him the 1,800 at the end of the period. That is 1,800. So Raymond's pay at the end of the second week is 1,800. Let's look at Isaac. Isaac's unit produced at the end of the second week yield him 1,350. And then the minimum wage that was set gave him what? 1,596. Which of the two is higher? So we pay him 1,596, which is higher than the quantity he produced. That is, the piecework is lower than the minimum wage. So we pay him the guarantee minimum wage of 1,596. Mercy produced 96, which earned her 1,440. But the guarantee minimum wage yielded her 2,014, which is higher than the piecework. So we pay Mercy the guarantee minimum wage of 2,014. Then Youngson also had 1,575 from the piecework, and then the guarantee minimum wage set was 1,330, meaning his piecework is higher than the guaranteed minimum wage that have been set. So we pay 1,575 as indicated here as the basic pay for Jansen at the end of the second week. So we have 1,575 at the end of the week. So at the end of the second week, the organization is going to pay this total amount as the basic pay for each of the employees. We have 1,800 plus 1,596 plus 2,014 plus 1,575, giving us 6,985 as the total amount the organization is going to incur on 8 workers. These are the 3 types of calculating employees' wages under the piece rate method of labor remuneration. When you go to some organization, they have some incentives they pay to their workers to entice them to work harder or to produce more output. Now let's look at what an incentive is. An incentive scheme is an arrangement under which a company makes extra payment to employees to reward them for good performance. Some organization uses the bonus scheme and some uses the overtime scheme. I will talk about them briefly as we are doing revision. It means you've already done it, so we are just going to revise what we have done so far. When we talk about overtime, it is the extra hours an employee works after the normal or beyond the normal working hours. The extra hours an employee worked beyond the normal working hours. So we have overtime. Overtime is the extra time a worker spent on the job over the normal time given, that is working beyond the normal working hours. So if a company sets 8 hours, as GES said, all teachers are supposed to go to work for 8 hours. If a worker goes beyond the 8 hours, it means the worker is doing what? An overtime. And then the overtime premium is the amount paid to a worker over and above the normal rate and for a job done in excess of the normal time allowed. So when I do overtime, as in if I spend more time beyond the normal working time, the rate that will be given to me is called overtime premium. Then we have the bonus scheme. The bonus scheme. The bonus scheme is also an incentive given to workers. But when we come to cost accounting, we say bonus scheme is an extra payment made to workers for spending less time to complete a job or to produce an output than expected. So bonus are paid based on the time you saved for the organization. If your manager gives you 10 hours to complete a job or to produce a certain quantity of a product, and you use lesser time to produce that number of units, or you use lesser time to complete the job, the time that you saved from the normal working hours is being paid as bonus. So if you are giving 10 hours to complete a job and you use 5 hours to complete that particular job, the 5 hours that you have saved, that is the 10 normal working hours minus the 5 hours you use to complete the job, is the bonus. So let's look at the key points and the bonus. We have time allowed. We have time allowed, which is the time that have been specified for a particular job to be completed. And we have the time taken. The time taken is the time the employee used to complete a job or the time the employee used to produce a certain number of output. And then the time saved. The time saved is the time allowed less the time taken. You saved a particular number of hours by completing the job on time or earlier before the time set for the job. So we have time allowed, time taken, and then time saved. We have various ways of calculating bonus scheme in an organization. Each organization and how they want to calculate their bonus. We have the housing scheme, where we look at half of the time you saved multiplied by a rate that will be given to you. So the housing scheme, that is half time. In your exams, sometimes WAEC will not give you half time. It will give you the name, housing scheme. So you'll be asked to calculate the bonus using the housing scheme. So it is your duty to know that the housing scheme is half the time saved multiplied by the rate that has been given for the time. Then we have the housing scheme. Housing scheme is 1/3 of the time you saved multiplied by the rate that has been given per the time. So in exams, if they tell you to calculate the bonus using 1/3, you should know it has severe. But if they don't state 1/3 and they bring the name, you should know that housing scheme is 1/3 of the time you have saved multiplied by the rate per hour. Then the last one is the Rowan scheme. Rowan scheme. So as the name implies, know how to calculate it. If I mention housing scheme, you should know it's half the time saved multiplied by the rates per hour. When I mention housing scheme, you should know that it's 1/3 of the time saved multiplied by the rate per hour. And then the Rowan scheme is equal to time taken divided by the time allowed multiplied by time saved by the rate per hour. We will look at an illustration as we go on. But before that, let's talk about overtime. Overtime, as I mentioned earlier, is the extra time a worker spent on the job. And the premium is an amount paid to a worker over and above the normal rate earned for a job done in excess of the normal time allowed. We have various ways or different methods of calculating the overtime as well. We have time and a half. It is the organization duty to pay you an amount of money for the extra hours you have worked. So if I'm supposed to go for work for 8 hours and I work beyond the 8 hours, my organization needs to pay me for the extra hours I have done. So we have time and half as one method of calculating overtime, a time and a half. That says the time I have done if the working hours is 8 hours and I work for 12 hours. The extra time I have done will be the 12 hours less the 8 hours, which will give me 4 hours. Now the organization is saying the time and a half, meaning I'm going to be paid half of the time I have worked, as in the extra time I have worked. So our overtime, as you can see from the first method, as time times half. That is the 4 hours. 4 hours times half of it. So what will be half of 4? That is 2. But students are advised for you to move fast, you go by one whole number 1 over 2. That is one whole number 1 over 2 multiplied by 4. When you do these two, you should get the same answer. The first one means I should look for half of the 4 and add it to the 4, giving me 6 hours. When I do extra hours of 4, I'm not just going to be paid the 4 hours for the 4 hours, but I'm going to receive payment for the 4 hours plus half of the 4 hours. So when I look for 4 hours, half of 4 hours, it will give me 2. I need to add this 2 back to the 4, giving me 6 hours, multiplied by the rate that has been given for the overtime. Okay, so you have to add back the 2 to the 4, giving 6. And if you go by this 2, it will give you the straight up. So students are advised most of the time to use the second one, as in one whole number 1/2 multiplied by the overtime, as in the number of hours done. Next, you have the opportunity to call in and ask any question if you are having any difficulty from the lesson we've been having today. Today we've been looking at the concepts or basic keywords or key concepts in accounting for labor. As the lesson is ongoing, you can call in if you have any questions. Let's continue. So you can use the second one, as in the one whole number 1/2, and multiply it by the time saved. So what I have indicated here, the one whole number 1/2 multiplied by 4 will give us 6. Just as if I look for half of the 4 and I add it to the 4, that is 2. So I need to add this 2 plus the 4 hours, that is the extra 4 hours I've worked, which will also give us 6. So you are most of the times advised to use the second one, that is the one whole number 1/2, which will give us the 6 straight, and we multiply it by the rate for the overtime. The second method is the time and a third. The organization can tell you that overtime is paid at time and a third. It's the same way we will go. That is, we will have to if the extra hours the employee did is 4 hours and he's being paid at time and a third, it means the 4 hours multiplied by 1/3. We need to look for 1/3 of 4 and add it back to the 4 before payment can be made. When you work for extra 4 hours, you have the opportunity to enjoy 1/3 of the 4 hours plus the 4 hours you have done. Or, as I stated earlier, you can still go by 4 whole number, as in the 4 hours multiplied by one whole number 1/3, which will give us the total amount or the total number of hours that is to be paid for the overtime. So 4 times 1/3 will give us 1.3. This will give us 1.3. When we add the 1.3 to the 4, we are going to get the total overtime hours as 5.3 hours. And when we do it this way too, it will give us straight 5.3 hours. Then we multiply it by the rate. So always go by the second method, because when you use the first method and you forget to add the 1.3 back to the 4 hours, it means you are paying the employee below the number of hours he or she has worked. So you are supposed to enjoy the time you worked plus 1/3 of that time multiplied by the rate. And the last method under the overtime is double time. Double time, as indicated on your screens. When I work overtime of 4 hours, I'm going to enjoy double of the time I have worked. That is the 4 hours multiplied by 2. The 4 hours multiplied by 2. So double the time means if I work an extra hours of 4 hours, my overtime is going to be the 4 hours multiplied by 2 hours, meaning I'll be paid for 8 hours. Instead of the 4 hours I did, I'm going to enjoy double the time I worked for. So double is 2 times the number of hours, extra hours I did. That is the 4 hours multiplied by the 2 hours, giving us 8 hours. And we multiply the 8 hours by the rate. So for example, if the rate is 10 cedis, then the employee is going to receive 80 cedis as an overtime. Employee will receive 80 cedis as an overtime. The phone lines you can call through if you have any question. is 0302 0302 211 698. 0302 211 698. And the second one is 0302 211 699. 0302 211 699. You can call on any of these lines if you have any question with so far the lesson we've had. So we go back to circumstances under which the piece rate method may be used. Where work done can be measured. If you cannot measure the output an employee has produced, it means we cannot use the piece rate method of remuneration. As I mentioned earlier, the piece rate method is based on results or based on the units an employee has produced. So we can only use the piece rate method if the work done by an employee can be measured. When I look at a carpenter, I can count the number of decks he has produced at the end of the day. So I can use the piece rate method to pay his wage at the end of the day. Where more emphasis is on quantity of output, that is when we can use the piece rate. And where extra output is desirable, we use the piece rate method of labor remuneration to pay our employees. Now we have circumstances under which the time rate method may also be used. Where output or performance is difficult to measure. At the end of my lesson, you cannot measure the work I have done. So with that, GES will have to pay me based on the number of hours I spent on my job. Okay. Hello, Ramadan.
Yes.
Good evening. Yes. I hope you are doing well and you are following the lesson.
Yes, please.
Okay, what is your question?
Please, my question is how to find the overtime rate.
Please, can you take the question again?
Please, overtime.
The overtime.
Yeah.
Okay.
The definition of it again.
The overtime.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, as I said, if a worker, I hope you are watching on your screen. Ramadan. Okay, so Ramadan question is how to look for the overtime for an employee. So, for example, if an employee works for 10 hours, normal working hours is 10 hours. So, normal working hours. It's 10 hours. Okay? And the employee works for 12 hours. What will be his overtime if he is paid at a time and a half? Overtime is equal to half times time. So if we say an employee is paid based on half the time he worked, what will be our overtime here? Our overtime is 2 hours. That is the 12 hours he worked less the normal working hours of 10 hours. So his overtime is 2 hours. So the overtime is going to be 2 hours. Sorry. We have 2 hours multiplied by half the time. And I mentioned earlier that when you're asked to calculate overtime, I prefer you go by the second method here. 1 whole number 1/2. Because when you look for half the time worked, that is 2 hours times half, and the rate for it is 10 cedis, multiplied by the rate. The rate is 10 cedis. You are supposed to look for this half of the 2 hours, add it back to the 2 hours and multiply by the rate. So half of 2 hours will give us 1. Half of 2 hours is 1. When we add this 1 to the 2, so 1 hour plus the 2 hours multiplied by the rate of 10, giving us 3 hours multiplied by 10. So when an employee works for 2 hours, he wouldn't be paid the 2 hours, but he will be paid half of the 2 hours he worked plus the 2 hours. So half of the 2 hours is 1. So this 1 plus the 2 hours he worked multiplied by the rate. So we now have a total of 3 hours. 3 hours multiplied by the rate of 10. So his overtime will be 30 cedis. 30 cedis. If you don't go by this and you are going by the second one, that is 1 whole number 1 over 2, it will give us the same thing. That is the 1 whole number 1 over 2 times 2 hours multiplied by a rate of 10 cedis. So when we do 1 whole number, 1 divided by 2 multiplied by 2 hours, it gives us the 3 direct. So we multiply the 3 times the 10 cedis, giving us the 30 cedis here. So either you go by this straight, as in going by the 1 whole number 1 over 2, multiplying it by the 2 hours direct by the rate of 10. Or you go this way. When you go this way, note that you are looking for half of the time, extra time the person worked, which is the 2 hours. That is the 12 hours less the normal working hours of 10. And you are going to get 1. You add the 1 back to the 2 hours. That is the extra hours the employee worked, and multiply by the rate. I hope, Ramadan, your question have been answered. Hello, Faisal. Okay, we lost Faisal, so we continue our lesson. Okay, so we were on circumstances under which time rate method may be used. And as I was saying, where output of performance is difficult to measure, you cannot measure the work or the output I have done at the end of this revision session. So with that, we use the time rate method to pay employees. That means they are going to pay me based on the number of hours I'm going to spend on the job. Where management places emphasis on quality of product as more important. We are looking at the quality, not the quantity you have produced. When we want to see the quality rather than the quantity, we use the time rate method of remuneration. When we are looking at quantity, that is when we use the piece rate method. Where worker is a learner or an apprentice, we use the time rate method. We see some of the apprentices under our tailors and seamstresses, when they go to work, because they are now learning, their bosses pay them based on the number of hours they spend on the job. And where trade unions insist on time rates method only. Where trade unions insist on time rates only, we use the time rates method as a base to pay our employees. Now, let's take an illustration on the bonus scheme. Mare produced 80 units within 20 hours. The time set for the execution of the work was 25 hours. 80 units within 20 hours, and the time set was 25 hours. An hourly wage rate of 30 cedis was paid. So the hours for working is 20 hours. That is the normal working hours. And then the worker used 20 hours. The normal working hours is 25 hours. And the worker used 20 hours. The wage for paying is 30 cedis per hour for each employee. So if the normal working hours is 25 and Mare used 20 hours to produce 80 units, what will be his bonus premium for the day? We are going to illustrate it by using the various method of calculating or solving for bonus. We have the housing scheme. As I said, in your questions or WASI, WAEC may not put using half to pay the bonus. If the name appears, it means you should know that housing scheme is half. And then housing scheme is 1/3. And then the Roman scheme is time taken over the time allowed times time saved multiplied by the rate. So we go to our worksheet and we look at the first method of calculating bonus, which is the housing scheme. The housing scheme. And the housing scheme is half times the time saved multiplied by the rate per hour. What is the time saved per hour? Question. Per hour question. The normal working hours is 25 hours and Mare used 20 hours. The time saved is what? 5 hours. So normal working hours. Normal hours is 25 hours. The time taken to produce 80 is the 20 hours. And we have the time saved. So we can change the normal hours as time allowed. So we have the time allowed as the 25 hours. The time he took to produce 80 units is 20 hours. What will be the time he saved? That says the 25 hours less the 20 hours, giving us the 5 hours. So the time saved is 5 hours. So what will be his bonus? His bonus based on the housing scheme. That is half the time saved multiplied by the rate per hour. So we have half times the time saved of 5 hours multiplied by the rate per hour, which is 30 cedis given to us per the question. So we look for half of 5 hours multiplied by the rate of 30 cedis. Let's all take our pens and calculators and work through it together. So, hello, Mensah.
Hello.
Hi, Mensah. Good evening.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Please, what's your question?
My question is the one who's doing, I don't understand.
Please, can you come again?
The one is on the board. I can't understand what it's saying.
Okay, did you check the question and which part don't you understand?
Look at the question A.
Come again.
Option A. Look at.
The A is asking you, this is the question we are solving on the screen. And we are looking at the bonus using the different method of calculating bonus. We have the housing scheme, the housing scheme, and Rowan scheme. If you have been following, I mentioned that the housing scheme means half of the time saved. Bonus is based on the time you saved. If an worker gives you 10 hours for you to work and you use 7 hours to work, you have saved 3 hours for the organization. That means you completed the work before the time given to you. So we are using this question to illustrate. The worker used 20 hours instead of the 25 hours given. That is the 20 hours here. But the normal working hour, that is the time that was allowed for him, was 25 hours. So he saved how many hours? 5 hours. His bonus is going to be paid based on the time he has saved. The housing scheme is one method of calculating the bonus for an employee, and that is half the time he has saved. So when you come to our worksheet, you can see that I've indicated half times time saved multiplied by the rate per the time he saved. So we were given 30 cedis as the rate. The workings I have done here is the time he was allowed. He was allowed 25 hours and he used 20 hours. So the number of hours you saved is what? 5 hours. So this is where we will end today's lesson on labor accounting or accounting for labor. Rahman, your question will be answered on our next episode as we are running out of time. But I will encourage you to take your textbook and look at the various methods in calculating for bonus for an employee in an organization. Until we meet another time next week, enjoy your evening.